Are you ready? Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot.
Is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
Home run. Good.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson. Coming up on today's program, I recently got to sit down with Canadian national boccia player Liza Puri. We discussed her recent success in the sport and how she's been named to the national team for the first time in her career. We also discussed the dud of a Super Bowl later on. Maybe I'm wrong. I have a panel for a reason, but I believe it was a dud of a Super Bowl. And we're going to talk about the Four Nations Cup, which begins on Wednesday if you're listening to the podcast when it is released. I'm joined by Josh Watson and Cam Jenkins. Here comes your headlines.
Neutral Zone headlines.
On Para is excited to announce the members of our 2024-2025 women's wheelchair basketball team, who will compete at the 2025 National Championships, taking place May 23rd to 25th, 2025 at Durham College, Ontario Tech University in Oshawa, Ontario. For the full team roster, follow them on all social media platforms, which you will hear about later in the show. Congratulations to those who made the team.
Come join the Cruiser Sports on February 22nd and 23rd for a series of Try It events. Their Try It events are always free, all equipment is provided, and no experience is required. While we always prioritize these events for individuals with physical disability, friends and family are more than welcome to join. For more information, please contact Lisa at paraathletics@cruisers-sports.com.
Russia and Belarus will remain banned from any international ice hockey competition for the 2025-2026 season, as the IIHF has announced. And this just seems to be rolling on, and every year we get a notification from whatever we follow that says the ban is continuing. So at some point they will be back, just not as of yet. Those are your headlines for this week. If you want to get a hold of us on social, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this bowl game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR.
Strike!
Pitch and a strike. Hey gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
I am pleased to be joined today by Liza Puri, who is involved in bocce and has been for a number of years, and she recently made the Canadian national program, so we'll be talking about that a little bit. Liza, thank you so much for joining us. I greatly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Brock. I'm glad to be here.
Can we start by talking about how you became involved in boccia?
It's funny because a lot of people have been asking me that, and the same story I come up with is basically I moved here from Toronto in 2001, and my husband at that time knew Tammy McLeod. So I went to watch her play and I talked to her a bit, and she actually basically took me under her wing because he asked her, can you please take my wife under your wing and teach her the game? She wants to know all about bocce and compete eventually. So that's how I became involved.
Very cool. And when you were first part of the game, you were actually in what was considered the open division. And then you recently got reclassified into the BC1 category. Can you talk a little bit about switching from one category to the other?
For me, it wasn't really the switch that really bothered. Well, I wouldn't say bothered me, but there was a bit of a change in my body dynamics. I lost my vision. That was one thing that gradually changed over the years. And then the mobility of basically my arms got a little weaker because of my disability, because like they say, if you don't use it, you lose it. I try using, try to keep up my energy and all that, but sometimes it might be a little difficult. But for me, it wasn't really. I'm glad I'm a BC1. I think it gets me further along in my career that I want to compete in. But it wasn't really a drastic change for me. I knew it was happening. So when I talked to the classifiers, because the classifiers, when they classified me from open to now a BC1, I every time they classified me, I kept saying, I know I'm basically going downhill, but that doesn't stop me from playing. It's just that I wanted to make them aware of what was happening to my joints, my muscles, but I didn't want to stop playing, and I wanted to compete more. But they're like, we still consider you, because I went from I don't know if you remember, Brock, I went from an open to a BC2 to a BC1. And I kept saying that's gradually what happens with people with CP. Some people with CP lose their muscle tone if they don't use it long enough, right? So I kept saying I'm getting kind of weaker, and I kind of need help, holding the ball or giving me the ball, because I can't see which ball I'm picking up unless it's a really bright background. So eventually they tested me again, and they agreed with me that I was a BC1.
And so overall, you were accepting of these changes because, as you mentioned, it opened some doors for you.
It has. Honestly, I was kind of like you when you mentioned when you were talking to Lance about going from one classification to another. Don't mind bringing you in this conversation, I hope. I kind of was okay about it as time went on, but the very beginning I was angry, but I knew that it wasn't me. It was my body reacting to not being able to do the things I used to be able to do, and that's what I accepted, that fact. And yeah, it did open some amazing doors for me.
Yeah, I mean, to speak about that exact moment you're talking about with my conversation with Lance, I mean, yeah, I'll be honest. I was angry, I was sad, I was mad, I was all kinds of different emotions until my original coach, Michelle Worsfold, said to me, look, buddy, this is going to open doors. It's okay. You were wrongfully classified in the beginning. And for you, it wasn't necessarily that you were wrongfully classified. It's just the nature of disability and how, unfortunately, cerebral palsy can sometimes progress depending on how it affects you and what part of the brain it affects and things like that. So yeah, I can understand and can appreciate all those emotions.
Exactly. And so I had to come to grips, which I have, that my body sometimes doesn't do what I need it to do, right? I have a very spastic CP, and my muscle tone is strong, but sometimes you just lose the ability to have that ability to see which ball you're picking up. Because when I'm playing, I can't even see the jack, right? It depends how far it goes. So I have to be mentally know where the jack is without basically seeing it clearly.
Yeah, and just so everybody understands, I'm also vision impaired, and so when I played, I don't think vision was so understood in Boccia. And when I was doing the provincial championships not that long ago, this past summer, what ended up happening was I saw you would throw your jack, and then the paddle that the referee would use to signify red versus blue to throw, they would put it behind the jack ball to help enhance your view of the jack. And I remember thinking that is forward moving of the sport, to suggest that, nope, there's the jack and there it is. We're long past that. And Boccia prides itself in saying that, it's a sport for everybody. And I think this goes to show that, Lisa, that now we're kind of moving into that stage where it's like everybody can play here. Everybody can get involved, even if you have a physical disability and a vision impairment combined with that.
Yes, exactly. And honestly, that helped me tremendously, them showing me the paddle behind the ball, because if the paddle's not there, then I have to do mentally, where did I throw the ball? Which side did I throw the ball? I have to do like the arm thing, right or left. I have to mentally vision myself throwing the jack ball and then hearing where it landed. Because if it goes too far, I can't see it. That's clear.
Yeah. That's very cool, and I'm very, very excited that they've made that change for you and hopefully others as well, because it can make a big difference.
It could.
Let's talk a little bit about your Canadian championships. And if memory serves me correctly, this was your first Canadian championships that you were able to attend. Am I correct with that?
Yes, you are.
Yes, I thought so. So you were able to obtain a bronze medal. Can you tell me a little bit about being in Ottawa and obtaining that bronze medal?
Honestly, I'm glad I had the support of my coach and my sports assistant and everyone around me, because it was nerve-wracking for me because it was my first time at the championships. But when I obtained that bronze medal, I was basically crying. I was so happy. I'll tell you a little story, Brock, and I've told the story before. The day I got that bronze medal, I was being respectful of all the players around me, still playing. So my sports assistant, Lorna McKenzie, she said to me, she pushed me out of the gym, and she said to me, "We need to go somewhere." I'm like, "Okay, where are we going?" She says, "We're going to the athlete lounge." I'm like, "Okay, why are we going to the athlete lounge?" And Tammy, my coach, was behind us. So we're all going to the athlete lounge, and all of a sudden, my sports assistant starts jumping up and down. I started crying. Tammy started crying. We were like shaking hands, just hugging each other, because it was my first time being at the championships at a national level, and I got a bronze medal. That's very rare for somebody who just came back out of retirement.
Yes, I have actually heard bits of that story through different people, and I can also relate that I won a bronze medal at my first national championships. Nobody expected that to happen in 2006, myself included. I went in as a BC2 and played the event as a BC1. So to achieve that at a level at your first nationals, and the competition is so strong at the national level, it's pretty impressive. And I'll be honest, Lisa, that was the reason why we are having this conversation, because Lance, who you obviously heard the interview, Lance really plugged you and said she earned the medal. And everybody in Ontario is extremely proud of what you've been able to accomplish, and the accomplishment doesn't necessarily stop there. You have made the national program for 2025. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what that's like?
I have a very hard training schedule, which I told both my coaches, Tammy and Team Canada coach, I'm ready to go. I know it's going to be difficult, but I'm up for the challenge. I'm very excited to wear that uniform to represent Canada. I'm very happy. Like I said, this is my first time. Ever since I was a little girl, I watched the Olympics, I watched the Paralympics, and I was just dreaming of the day that I could wear that jacket or that uniform to represent Canada.
That's awesome. And let's talk about, when might you be able to wear that uniform? What is your schedule like here as we begin the early part of 2025?
I just started practicing with the scheduling yesterday. We don't have it on paper yet per se, but basically it's going to be a very hectic schedule, talking to coaches and talking to Tammy and just getting I'm now doing about 2 or 3 days of possibly 4 of being in the gym and doing my drills, doing my games, just practicing, keeping up with my skills.
Fantastic. And I can tell you that national team schedule can be very busy and very quickly can it be busy. So
I have figured that out. That's one thing I have figured out is it's no more being at the home team level. It's now representing Canada, and I want to make them proud. I truly do.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that. As we've talked about in the intro and throughout the interview, you have switched categories and you're now at a national level of competing for Canada. What would you say to somebody who might have been in your shoes in the beginning, open division, couldn't really go anywhere based on the rules of the open division, then you moved to the BC2 category and now you're in the BC1 category? What would you tell somebody who maybe at the beginning of your stages thinking, is this worth sticking around in whatever sport?
I think what I would tell them is be patient. It is worth sticking around. If you love the sport so much like I do, it's worth sticking around. Don't ever give up.
Love that. I really do. Lisa, thank you so much for doing this interview. We greatly appreciate it. And congratulations on your success and continued future success as well.
Thank you. May I say something before I go?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
I would like to thank you and Lance for mentioning me on the last podcast. It really helps. I'm very happy that we are all in all this together. And I just want to say thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And on a personal level, Lisa, and I don't do this too often with our interviews, but I am very proud to see that all the work that you put in. There's a few other people who have made the national program as well. So to see all those Ontario athletes representing, I am very proud. Being an insider, but also an outsider. So congratulations once again. And I, for one, am very proud of what you have accomplished.
Thank you very much.
That was Liza Puri talking to us about her journey in Boccia and telling us that she won a bronze medal at her first national championship.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
So I mentioned in our intro a little while ago that the Super Bowl was a dud. Let's start with the fact that the final score was 40-22 for Philadelphia. I don't normally start the conversation in these points of the show, but I decided today that I was going to do that because I found some statistics that I really think are indicative of the success of the Philadelphia Eagles. So, first of all, they held Kansas City to 6 points through the first half and into the third quarter, which doesn't happen very often. Secondly, Jalen Hurts, who is the Philadelphia quarterback, had 221 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 72 rushing yards. 7 would be unfortunate if he only had 7 rushing yards through the whole game, but 72 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. To me, that's indicative of the result of Philadelphia. They just took advantage of some long passes as well, and everything just worked out. And Patrick Mahomes did not look comfortable. Cameron, what say you on the Super Bowl?
Well, I'll give some stats, I guess, from Kansas City then. First half, they had a total of 33 or 34 yards. Total yards in the first half. They had 1 first down the entire first half. How in the HE double footballs can you win a game if you're only getting 1 and 34 yards total? Like, they were horrible, the Chiefs. And it's because of the Eagles defense, and that's why the Eagles won this game, is because of their defense. And that's not even to mention, how many times did Mahomes get sacked? When I stopped counting, it was 6. So I don't know if he got sacked any more than 6, but when I counted it was 6. Couple interceptions, I believe. And then he kind of was in the second half trying to redeem himself by getting 2 or 3 touchdowns or whatever the case is. But did they score any points in the first half? I don't think they did.
They got 6. They got those two
field goals,
and that was it. It was can't remember what the score was at the half, but it was something to 6, and it was not pretty. Josh, what say you about the Super Bowl?
What say I about the Super Bowl? It was a shocking display. The last time these two teams met, when we affectionately referred to it as the Kelsey Bowl, because one Kelsey brother was competing against the other, the game ended in a field goal. That was the difference in the score. This time, that was not the case. What I saw was a Chiefs team that couldn't mount any offense. And while they did a great job at stopping Saquon Barkley as a running back, they did not do a good job at pass defense. And when you cannot adequately control a team's running and passing attack, you are not going to succeed. I was quite impressed with the way the Eagles receivers stepped up in this game, because I honestly felt like Kansas City was the more rounded team. I thought Kansas City was going to walk away with this. It might have been close, but I was convinced that they were going to be the 3-time champions, and I was pleasantly wrong. I believe I said on this program last week that my heart wanted the Eagles to win, but that I felt that the Chiefs would do the job. And I'm pleasantly mistaken.
And I just checked the statistics, and KC didn't get any points the first or second quarter. And the only time that they got a bunch of points was the fourth quarter, which inevitably the game was over anyway. And they got 16 points in the fourth quarter, and Philly got 6. But you could tell that Philly kind of wasn't giving up, obviously, but they weren't as mentally prepared in the fourth quarter like they were the other 3 quarters.
Wow. What was I doing the first half of the football game? Because I honestly thought they had 6.
So did I.
Clearly.
No, they got 6 in the third quarter.
Yeah. Thank you for fixing that. It just, all in all, I think the consensus is that Kansas City could never get going. And I remember that they scored that long touchdown in early in the fourth quarter or late in the third quarter, one of the two. And I was just thinking to myself, where was this effort, 3 quarters ago? It just seemed like Mahomes was trying to do Mahomes things too late, and it worked in the fourth quarter, but it just was too far gone by then. I mean, I was considering shutting it off after the halftime show, which we'll get discussing in a minute, but we'll discuss it in short order, I think. It was just not a very exciting Super Bowl whatsoever to be a part of. It was one of the matchups that I said I would be happy if this was a matchup, but it just wasn't good. It wasn't exciting. And if you hold Kansas City to no points in the first 3 quarters, basically, you're doing something right. And credit to Philadelphia for doing that right thing. And I think too, you got to remember that these guys have 2 weeks to plan for the Super Bowl, because there's that Pro Bowl weekend in the middle. So you do sort of have that extra time, Josh. So does that play a factor in it, in your mind, or was Kansas City just purely not prepared?
I don't think it was that Kansas City was not prepared. I think it was that Kansas City has not had their full team together for much of this year. They've had injuries, they've had suspensions, they've had all manner of things. And so their entire team has not been together for a full season. And I think when we've seen them successful in the past, they've been together for the whole year and they've been able to game plan and utilize their weapons. I just think Philadelphia did a better job of utilizing weapons this time. I think that playing the same team 2 years later helps, because really Kansas City hasn't changed that much since their last Super Bowl appearance against Philadelphia. Whereas Philadelphia has. They've picked up Saquon Barkley, and he's done exactly what he wanted to do, I think, in coming to Philly. He's won himself a Super Bowl that he never would have won as a New York Giant, in my opinion. And the likes of A.J. Brown and the other receivers, the Dallas Goederts and all those weapons for Philadelphia just executed on the day. And sometimes that happens. We've all been part of teams where you can be a juggernaut and you can be doing great during a season, and then all of a sudden you have one game and it just all falls apart. And for Kansas City, it just happened to be in the biggest game.
Yeah, like the first 2 or 3 catches that Kelsey tried to catch, he dropped. And usually, especially this time of year, at least for the past couple of playoff games, he hasn't been dropping the ball, and he's been doing very well. Mahomes, when's the last time he was sacked once in a game, let alone 6 flipping times? Usually, like, he's got good vision, and there's been a few times where, I was a friend of the show, or we all know him, Ryan Bennett. I was watching the game with him, and it's like when Mahomes was in the pocket, he would usually he kind of finds a space to be able to run through and get through that, but he wasn't able to do that this time. And a couple of times where you thought he would, somebody was able to grab his feet or his ankles and be able to get him down, where Jalen Hurts, he was able to do the same thing, but he got through it, and then he was able to get big yardage. But yeah, like, trying to look at positives, Saquon Barkley, at least from the Chiefs' perspectives, Saquon Barkley, I think they did a great job at handling him and not getting a lot of yardage. But with the Eagles, their defense is just, superb. And I think that's pretty much how they won the game, is because of their defense.
Yeah, I mean, when you get Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable, I think that this game got into his head. I mean, when you don't score points and you're among, the league lead through the regular season of most points scored, and you don't get anything, that's indicative. And I think it can get in your head as an athlete of like, this is not what I should be doing. And when you do that and it piles up and it's like, okay, I guess we're not doing this. But I don't like the narrative of, Kansas City didn't show up either. I saw this on social media after, on my way home from a Super Bowl party, but it's just, I don't like the narrative of Kansas City didn't show up, because you got to give credit to Philadelphia. And the suggestion was Kansas City didn't show up, and that's why Philadelphia won. And they weren't giving credit to Jalen Hurts, which is why I led this conversation off with the stats that I did. The guy won the MVP of the Super Bowl, and deservedly so, in my opinion, because he was able to get it done in a way that Patrick Mahomes could not. And I think that's just the reality of it. And also, it is difficult in any sport to win 3 championships in a row. I mean, it's difficult to do, and so I think that was indicative of that as well. Anything else on the game before I ask you guys about the halftime show?
Just that it looks, based on what I can see, that the Chiefs held Saquon Barkley to 97 total yards between pass catching and rushing. Anytime you can hold an elite running back to those yards, you think you're doing something well. But unfortunately, there was just no passing defense to speak of. And I think that was the tide of the game. I mean, anytime you're in a Super Bowl and you can put your backup quarterback in and it's not an emergency, you're doing something right.
Yeah, for sure you are. I saw something, and I believe, Josh, it was sent to you, to me by you this morning, and I'm going to describe what it was to the audience. And it was, the caption was, "My dad watching the Super Bowl halftime show." And the gentleman was an older man, and he was watching the halftime show of Kendrick Lamar, and he said, "Do you understand what Kendrick Lamar is saying?" And you know, he didn't get it. And I have to say that I was in that camp of like, what am I watching? What's going on here? I understand that it's not my type of music, and that's part of it. I understand. But what did you guys think of the halftime show? Like, dislike, indifferent? Where do we sit? Cameron, go first.
Kendrick Lamar isn't necessarily my cup of tea, but that type of music, for the most part, there's always exceptions, isn't my type of music. Although I find it quite interesting, the backstory with Kendrick Lamar and Drake and the beef that they have and their songs that they're spitting out, or however you say it. And having Serena Williams there and doing the Crip walk or Crip dance. And the backstory to that is that Drake used to date Serena, apparently, and they had a messy breakup or whatever. So Serena was there, and that's kind of a diss towards Drake. And so I was looking today just kind of at the whole the diss between Drake and between Kendrick Lamar. And I don't know, I think I don't necessarily like the music. However, I appreciate a person that, whether it's lyrically or rapping it in words, how they are able to express themselves and be able to, just be able to express themselves. You know, you hear about rap battles and, you know, such things like that. And especially when you're doing it right on the spot, having to think and go back and forth. I don't know. I have an appreciation for that, but I personally did not like the Super Bowl halftime performance myself, because I think football, I just think that it's a different type of fan musically that watches that. And so I think some of the ones in the past, you know, probably were better, because you know, this is a very specific genre of music that I don't think a lot of the people at the Super Bowl appreciated.
Personally, I agree with the two of you. It was not my thing. I'm not a fan of rap music particularly. Much like you said, Cameron, I can appreciate the art form and I can appreciate the talent that's required to be a good rapper, but it doesn't resonate with me. Having said that, I understand why they've gone in this direction, and it's an effort to expand their reach to more fans. And I get that. It would be the same as if they would have had our favorite pop star come down out of the stands and perform the halftime show. That would be a direct draw to try and bring Taylor fans in. Like, that's what the NFL is going to try to do. They're going to try to appeal to as many people as they can, because they know there are people who will only tune in for the halftime show. And you know what? Good for them for trying to do that. Personally, I think the halftime shows should be an artist or artists that more fans will recognize. And I mean, maybe the three of us are in the minority on this. Maybe there are more people who would identify with Kendrick, but it wasn't me. I know somebody I was with did seemed to enjoy the show. She seemed to be a fan of that, and that's great. I'm glad that she enjoyed it. It just wasn't my thing. So we'll see what happens. And I mean, anytime I have to Google who's on stage in order to know who I'm watching, that's not a good sign.
No.
And I'm not living under a rock. I do know who Kendrick Lamar is, but at one point he had SZA join him on stage, and I had no idea who she was. I knew she had to be somebody because she was being featured, but I had no idea who she was, and I completely missed that Serena Williams was on stage.
Yeah.
Totally did not realize that was her.
Me either.
So, whatever. I hope a lot of people enjoyed it. Wasn't my thing.
I promise I'm gonna leave the halftime show in just a second because I want to talk Four Nations Cup. But if I could understand the words that were coming out, and I don't mean to sound crass, I don't mean to sound rude,
but you
if
guys sound like a bunch of old guys, and that's been doing generations to
dang it.
That's going on generations to generations. My parents, they were listening to 50s and 60s, and that's the good old music where you can understand what they're saying and da 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 da. But then, like the music I was listening to is, I can't understand that stuff, and and I could understand it, but now I'm the old cranky Cam. That I'm like, I can't understand what this guy is saying and all the this and that, and so that's a generational thing. It's going to happen all the time.
Yeah, I mean, this morning my wife, who's off right now, we got up this morning and she was scrolling through social media and she was seeing like top 10, best performances of the Super Bowl, and she said, why is this coming up? And I said, because you know darn well that most people didn't like the performance, and so we're kind of getting this microcosm of like, remember when Prince was on the stage? Remember when Phil Collins was on the this is what we're getting now. And I mean, I disagree with one of the lists where it said Coldplay was the number one band that's ever done the halftime show, and I have a love for Coldplay. They were at the Paralympics in 2012, but I just think to myself, number one Coldplay? Okay, sure, I guess, but
it's all based on personal
everyone's
preference.
taste, right?
Exactly. I mean, Brock, we know you're a country music fan, and that's totally fine. I love my country music too, but Coldplay would be higher on my list than it might be on yours, and that's just fine.
And Missy Elliott, I really enjoyed when she was on and doing the halftime show. But her music is a lot of rap or a lot of, that kind of stuff, and more towards Kendrick Lamar. But that was my generation growing up in the 90s with, the songs that she was singing. So.
Yeah, and I'm more of a rock and pop kind of a guy, so that stuff like Coldplay is going to be more my speed. So it's always somebody's individual preference, and that's what makes these lists great. Is you can sit there and go, no, that one was crap, or this one was good. I was with somebody last night who said to me, my favorite was the Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson. And I looked at him and said, that's just because you like the nip slip. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Might as well call a spade or a heart or whatever you want to call it.
Or a nipple
Whatever that pasty was.
Nipple. Anyway. For that time of year in February, it is very nipply out. So.
Well, that's true.
Right? Depends where it was, that Super Bowl that she did, but I don't have that off the top of my head where the city
I'm pretty sure it was an indoor stadium.
I guarantee it was.
Nicely climate controlled.
So it doesn't matter. All right, so let's talk about this Four Nations Cup that begins on Wednesday, which if you're listening to us on release, that's tomorrow. If you're listening to us in the past, look at your calendar, figure it out. But here's what the situation is. There are 4 nations that will compete. aptly named. Canada, United States, Sweden, and Finland. The format is a single round robin. At the end of the round robin, the top 2 teams will play each other in the final. What do you guys think of this type of event format? Like, dislike, what do we think? Josh, go ahead.
I will take this over the traditional All-Star game, personally, because the only part of the All-Star game I actually enjoy anymore is actually the skills competition, and I can see skill on display during this tournament. So I'm in favor of this. I would like to see more of it, although the more of it you provide, the less impact it tends to have. So I'm kind of on the fence about how often to do it, but I do like the idea of it and would love to see it expanded to more countries of the world.
I think this is the best opportunity available to them, because it's been since 2016 that we've had quote unquote best on best. And that was the World Cup of Hockey. So I think, there's a generation of hockey players that really haven't had any best on best competition. And one of those is McDavid. Off the top of my head, I don't think he's been on any best on best competition, because he wasn't at the Olympics. He wasn't at the World Cup of Hockey. And I don't know, like in 2022 or, 2022, 2020, like all of those, they were the bubble.
I think he was. I think he was at the World Cup, because I remember him being part of a Young Stars team.
Okay. Yeah, and that's when it was a bit different. Because was 2016 the year?
Might have been.
Or was that later on?
It was either 2016 or maybe during the pandemic. They might have had one.
Because you're right, they had a Team North America.
Exactly.
And then Canada and so on and so forth.
And then they had an underage, like it was almost like a World Junior team, which I think he fell into that at that point, and he was part of that 2016 tournament. But the point is still the same, Cameron, in that he hasn't had a lot of best on best outside of his junior days.
He's never been on a Team Canada.
Yeah,
right.
Representing his country, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to be on your Team Canada, playing as an NHL player, because he's been on Team Canada if you want to count juniors and stuff, but that doesn't count. You're talking now about, since he's been in the NHL, being at the highest level, he has not played on Team Canada.
Right.
And now he gets to. And even now, it's only 4 teams because of, like, Russia's not in it because of what the war in Ukraine. So I don't think it's necessarily the best competition, because you're not having the best, powers in the world going, one being Russia.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that this is the best they can do out of the situation that they're in. And hell yeah, I'll be wearing I think I still have a Team Canada jersey from 2010. So I'll be wearing that watching the Four Nations Cup or Team Canada, and I'll be cheering them on, because everyone's starved for, country on country hockey. So I'm looking very forward to it.
So I was having a conversation with our esteemed technical producer, Mark Apollo, and he said to me, he said, "What do you think about this event?" And I said, kind of gimmicky is what I said. And he said, the All-Star game is in that mode. And because he actually does some work for SiriusXM for the All-Star game. He gets to go and do technical things for the All-Star game every year, and he does that. And so this is in replace of that. And we also got the discussion about, like, this event is only, 8-10 days, whatever it is. And they can only have so much time that they can do in that span. So if we're saying this is the All-Star week, we do have to be careful as to, like, how many teams we get into, because you only have so much of a window. Having said that, 2 points to this that I want to make. First of all, are we saying that these are the 4 best teams? I'm guessing no, because Russia is not involved. But are these the 4 best teams, Cameron?
Absolutely not. You need Russia to be in there in order to, be one of the best teams. So I think, and I heard this on the Chris Johnson show today, because I was, watching that show because I really enjoy it. And, Chris Johnson was saying that the only way that this is going to get to a point of being really good is if you have something like the World Cup of Soccer and how they do it. And they have a lot of teams in there. So if you end up having something like that where it's kind of all over the world, not the games, but like nations or countries from all over the world playing, then, that would be probably the best if they can somehow do that, because it works out very well for the soccer. So if they can kind of do something like that and get other countries involved, and then you might see progress in other countries to be able to build the sport, I think something like that would be phenomenal. So,
Josh, if you're suggesting the idea of the window being only 8 to 10 days because you're putting this over what would be the All-Star break, could there be a world where you would have rotating countries so that you're not saying, we're only going to take these 4 nations? So, like, say, for example, the 2 finalists would be a guarantee, and then, you might rotate. If all things are equal, you might rotate some other teams so that there is that stability. Because I can foresee nations saying, well, screw you, you left us out of the 4 nation and you're not considering us best on best. But like Leon Draisaitl doesn't even get a sniff at this because Germany's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and that's my big issue with it. I think there's a way to do 6 nations, 8 nations, something like that, to get more teams involved, because really it is criminal that Leon Draisaitl's not there as one of the best players in the world. It's also difficult or almost impossible when you think of all the Czech and Slovakian players that are in the NHL that don't get to play in this, who are incredibly skilled athletes. And I mean, we can say what we want about Russia at this point. I agree with them being banned, but at the same time, it will never be best on best without Russian players having a way to play.
No.
And I don't agree with the athletes from Russia, or however they were trying to skirt it in a few of the Olympics, because that's just like, oh, Olympic athletes from Russia. Yeah, we know who they are. Thanks. You don't need to tell us. Like, just give them their flag, let them play, and understand that the guys playing in the NHL probably are not necessarily privately supportive of what's going on in their country.
No, and why not have I don't know if Team Europe, like having a Team Europe, and I don't know if Germany is within Europe, but like all of those places where Slovakia or Germany or whatever, like bunch them in, call them Team Bert and Ernie for all I care. I don't care what you call them, but then at least they're able to go there and be able to play. Because then you're having the best hockey players from certain countries play. So call them whatever you want, but I think that's a team that also should be in if you don't have enough NHL players. Because I think to play in this tournament, I think you have to be playing in the NHL too.
Yeah, you do. Yes. And I think they had, in 2016, they had a Team Europe as well for the same reason that we're discussing right now. And then they decided, well, let's throw in a junior team for fun because, well, we want to see Connor McDavid play, and he's McJesus, so can't have him not in the event, and, what have you. So I think there is ways. I would also say to both of you that if I was a guy like, Leon Draisaitl, who's not involved, am I butthurt for about 5 minutes? Yeah, probably. But then I look and I go, I'm going to go to Cancun somewhere and I'm going to sit and not do nothing. And I'll go back and play with the Oilers when it's all said and done. And by the way, you better not damage my line mate during the event in Connor McDavid, because we have bigger fish to fry when it's all said and done. So
when you look at it, though, Brock, what are people want to compete in more? This World Cup of Hockey, or in 2 years in 2026 or whenever it's going to be in the Olympics?
The Olympics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is just something to whet your appetite for some of the best players in the NHL to play in a tournament to make some money, because it's all about money at the end of the day, and we all know that. But then Draisaitl and everybody else that wasn't included in this tournament, they're going to be playing the Olympics, and that's the real carrot, is the Olympics.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's been a bit sad that the NHL hasn't been at the Olympics for a bit, but they're going to go back in 2026, which I am very grateful for, because I am predicting right now that the kid, Sidney Crosby, this will be his last Olympics in 2026. Mark it. I've said it. It's going to be a thing. Let's talk about favorites. I mean, obviously, we're all Canadian and we're rooting Canadian. Is that the overwhelming favorite, or could you see somebody else rising up? Cameron, let's start with you on this one.
To me, it's going to be either Canada or the U.S. that is going to win this tournament. The Americans, they have a very deep team. They don't seem to have a lot of problems or holes in the roster anywhere. Once again, I want to credit Chris Johnson of the Chris Johnson Show, because I did hear this, that he heard from an insider that he feels that if the forecheck game of Canada can really go at the States, that Canada will possibly win it, not easily, but they'll win it. Because they feel that the defensemen for the States, going back with the pressure, they may not be able to deal with the forecheck if that's what Canada ends up doing. So once again, I don't know. I'm just going by what Chris Johnson said from his insiders, because he's a great guy and he knows his stuff. So, but I think Canada's made good choices for their roster, and of course I'm going for Team Canada. Like, I think we all are. That's like obvious. I think they've got a great down center, and today Sidney Crosby skated because they were worried about him, and I saw a report where he is going to be playing in the tournament, and there's no problems. He's going to be playing, end of story. So when you've got McKinnon, you've got McDavid, and you've got Sidney Crosby down the middle.
Mitch Marner,
and he'll be on a wing, but I would just go with the centers. Like, they've got a really good forward unit just based on the centers, and then the defensemen, like, they ended up picking up Drew Doughty, who just came off the injured list for how long? But of course you want to get Doughty in there because he's so great on defense. He's playing 20 some odd minutes, and he's been in all of these competitions. How many times has he been to the Olympics and won? World Juniors, Stanley Cups, 2 times Stanley Cup winner. Like, you want someone like that to be on your roster, because every game is going to be so important.
Yeah, for me, I'm saying it's going to be a toss-up between Canada and the States. I don't know which one is going to be better, but it's going to be one of those two. And then I think Sweden's going to take third, personally. I know more about the Swedes than I do the Finns. The Finns may surprise me, but I feel like they're kind of the team that makes up the fourth team. Yep. I don't necessarily see them being that competitive, and hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's a really good tournament and everybody's really close. But I do think it's going to be Canada or the US in first, and then the other in second.
Yeah, that's where I think the NHL, and I understand that, I can hear the people saying, yeah, but then you're making it more gimmicky. This is where I think the NHL is missing it a little bit. I think they could be adding an extra round in this that they could do, where they could have a semifinal. I know then that you're adding everybody's playing in the semifinal because there's only 4 nations. But to say that only the top two play in the final and the other two just go home and you're ranked where you're ranked when it's all said and done, I would like to see an extra, game in there to get to the final, because literally all you're going to be allowed to do is one loss, and if you get two, you're pretty well done out of this event. Would you guys like to see an extra game, or am I just a Hockey Canada and prideful and want to see my country play more often? Josh?
I'm not against it. I just don't know how you make it work. If you expand it to 6 or 8 teams, then absolutely have a seeding round or whatever you want to call it. Give people a chance to up their opportunity. But with 4 nations, I think you have to leave it the way it is for now. But I definitely can see this being popular and being expanded to more teams, and then having a middle round, if you will, or a semifinal final.
Yeah, it's all based on the almighty dollar, and I'm a broken record saying that, but you don't want them to play too many games because they have to go back to their NHL teams. And how many games are left in the season? Like 30-ish games left in the season approximately, and you want them to be all good for the playoffs and Stanley Cup, because that's what they really care about. So I think the amount of games that they have for this is fine. And yeah, just kind of winner takes all. Once you get the top 2 teams, let's see who's still skating and go from there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think if you start expanding it into more games, you have to look at a different time of year, and then you run the risk of how many players are going to show up. Yep. If it's before the season or after the season.
And then you're running also into, if you do it later, you're running into world championships, playoffs.
Exactly.
Like it becomes a mess. And
it's a mess.
The way I was looking at it, if you wanted to look at 4 nations, the top seed at the end of the round robin plays the 4th seed, the 2nd seed plays the 3rd seed, and those are your 2 semifinal matchups, and then the 2 winners play for gold, and the 2 losers would then play for bronze, because there is no bronze medal game as it sits. If you finish 3rd in the round robin, you get 3rd place. That's what you get. And I don't know. I just love international hockey in the sense, but I also understand there's only so many days and times you can do that. So it all gets going on Wednesday. If there is a single day game, a single game day, it's 8 o'clock Eastern time. If it's a 2-game day, which there is 2 days of that, then it's 1 o'clock and 8 p.m. as well. So I think the first double game day is Saturday. Canada plays the 8 o'clock game that day. And then the second time there's the double game, Canada does play at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I was very mad until I realized, oh yeah, but that second day will be in the States, which then obviously you want the States to play in that primetime game. So that's why the schedule is the way it is, and it's going to be fun. We'll chat about it because there's nothing going on in the NHL anyways, and we'll all be watching the 4 Nations Cup and enjoying it. So that's what we'll get to do as this tournament goes on, and otherwise just enjoy sports as we do. And that is the end of our program for this week. I'd like to thank Josh Watson, Cam Jenkins. I'd also like to thank our technical producer, Mark Aflalo. Stay tuned for next week, because you just never know what happens when you enter the neutral zone. Be safe, be well.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.